Hello there and welcome to Focus on Africa. I'm Lukwesa Burek. Our top stories. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa heads to Davos to reassure international investors over his land reform plans.
So we're going to handle it in terms of our constitution, we're going to handle it in terms of the rule of law, and we're not going to allow any land grabs.
Zimbabwean music legend Tugu Oliver Mtukudzi has died in hospital in Harare at the age of 66. Also in the programme, tackling the challenges facing Liberia. And 1 year on, has George Weah kick-started the country or scored an own goal?
I want to be a winner, I want to perform. So I bring that energy to politics. What I want to do is to work for the people.
And in sport, Egypt's FA announces their country's biggest stadium will not be used during the Africa Cup of Nations. Hello there and thank you for joining us today on Focus on Africa, coming to you from BBC World News. Well, we begin tonight in Davos, a town in the Swiss Alps which hosts the annual World Economic Forum and where South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa today sought to reassure international investors over the country's land reform plans. He said it would be carried out without land grabs and would boost agricultural production. Well, let's go live now and speak to the BBC's diplomatic correspondent, James Landale, who's in Davos in Switzerland. James.
Well, good evening. As you say, Cyril Ramaphosa came here to Davos to bang the drum for South Africa to try and generate much needed investment. He said in his own words that growth in South Africa at the moment is subdued. It's not strong enough. And one of the ways he can grow the economy in South Africa, investing in infrastructure, investing in skills, is by getting Western and international investment into his country. The problem he's got is he's got to try and convince doubters and those investors who have concerns about stability in South Africa and within the region. And one of the issues that some investors have concerns about is this issue of land reform, hugely controversial in South Africa. And earlier today, I asked him just what his plans were and what he was going to do about it.
Because we need to make sure that we give security of tenure on land to more South Africans than just a few white South Africans. So we're going to handle it in terms of our constitution, we're going to handle it in terms of the rule of law, and we're not going to allow any land grabs. And that satisfies
What about
people.
compensation? Taking land without compensation?
Well, no, but what we are doing now is to pass the Expropriation Act or bill, which is going to identify various portions of land. And believe you me, most of it is state-owned land, where we're saying state-owned land now needs to be made available to the majority of our people. That is a process that is so empowering to the people of South Africa, and we're not going to be doing this whole policy reform, as I call it, out of vengeance, out of just smashing and grabbing.
But if it's not out of vengeance, some suggest it's being driven by politics rather than economics, that actually you're doing this because you're under pressure politically. You have to make this
in my book, even as we passed the resolution, we took care to make sure that the land reform process must be underpinned by increasing agricultural production, by ensuring that we've got food security, and it should never have a negative impact on the economy of the country. Now, with those three filters, we are now going to proceed to embark on land reform that is going to be beneficial to the economy and also to foster black economic empowerment, because that is one other thing. We want to use land as a resource to empower black South Africans who were prevented and deprived of participating in the economy of their country.
Let's talk now about Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Why have you not condemned the government violence there more strongly?
We are in constant discussions with the government of Zimbabwe. And as recently as just last night, I was talking to the government of Zimbabwe, and on the one side we are saying, let us encourage the government of Zimbabwe to move on with the reforms so that what's happening should not happen. let's lift the sanctions. Even if they may be regarded as targeted sanctions, they have a debilitating effect on the whole economy. Let's lift that. Let's encourage the government of Zimbabwe to move on with the reforms to ensure that the economic recovery does take place.
But Mr. President, we're not talking about economic reforms here and sanctions that might have an impact in the future. We're talking about people today who have been subject to what the Human Rights Commission in Zimbabwe says is systematic torture. People being dragged from their homes and beaten, people jailed. And yet, you know, I don't hear you saying the soldiers should be returned to barracks. I don't hear you saying those guilty should be held to account.
No, precisely. I mean, we are saying, obviously, the human rights of individuals must be respected. And that goes without saying. We don't even need to be, you know, broadcasting
Doesn't it need to be said?
It does need to be said, and the right moment for that arrives, because we are having our ears and eyes on the ground, and we are in constant collaboration with the government of Zimbabwe.
Well, James, how important was it, though, that Mr. Mnangagwa himself was not in Davos?
Well, again, he was expected to be here to bang the drum for Zimbabwe once again to try and raise some investment that he desperately needs too. But he wasn't here, unable to come because of the events taking place in his own country. And I think it reinforced, I think, for many people here in Davos, the sense that, you know, the situation in Zimbabwe is uncertain, and therefore investment from people who are here in the Swiss mountains will probably think twice before investing in Zimbabwe until they are convinced that the democracy is on track and that the rule of law can be established. And I think the evidence of the last few days and the scale of the state security violence will place question marks in many people's minds.
OK, James Lansdowne, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. OK, let's stay in Zimbabwe, and the government there has defended the crackdown by its security forces following those violent protests over that sharp rise in fuel that we've been witnessing. Our correspondent in Harare, Andrew Harding, sent us the latest.
Here at State House in Harare, the business of government is resuming as normal now. The President has been swearing in a new Prosecutor General. The message here today, very much from the authorities, is that yes, there were mistakes here in the past week, that it's been unfortunate, but that the focus now must be on the future and on fixing Zimbabwe's broken economy.
All reforms are painful, but they are a necessary dose that we have to go through if this economy is to recover. Tell me of any country which is having the kind of challenges that Zimbabwe is facing and which embarks on reforms that are not painful. Then I'll be able to doff off my head to you.
Do you accept that some of the protesters have legitimate demands, that these are ordinary people frustrated by the economic situation here and angry about the seemingly chaotic way in which your government has implemented some of these reforms?
To the extent that Zimbabwe is going through difficult economic difficulties, to the extent that Zimbabwe is embarking on reform programs that are painful, and to the extent that we have had some shortages, necessarily the citizen has a right to express his disgruntlement with the way things are. But that's not to, as it were, suggest that that same citizen who is disgruntled has a right to take law into their own hands. It would be wrong.
The Zimbabwean government here then insisting that the focus must now be on the economy, and that yes, the law will take its course here and violent protesters will be prosecuted, and that members of the armed forces, the security forces, if they committed excesses, they too will also face the weight of the law. But that the international community needs to understand that this is a government with a plan, and that plan is going forwards regardless of the criticism of what happened here this past week or so.
That was Andrew Harding there in Harare, and as all that was taking place in the capital, sad news emerging from the city that really has shocked the music industry in the country itself and further afield. This afternoon we were in the newsroom and we started to get reports that the Zimbabwean music legend Oliver Mtukudzi, known to his fans around the world simply as Tuku, had died in hospital. He was 66 and he'd been battling ill health for some time. Well, my colleague Sophie Kenye has been looking back on his life and legacy.
Oliver Mtukudzi was a man whose career spanned more than 4 decades, with 67 albums to his name. His Afro-jazz music crossed continents, creating a huge fan base around the world. He came to prominence in Zimbabwe prior to independence when he joined forces with another prominent musician, Thomas Mapfumo. Together, they provided the sound of the revolution at a time when the country was fighting the colonial government. Tuku, as he was nicknamed, was a social activist and often guided young musicians in their careers.
As an art center, the initial problem is that parents don't support their children in who they are, but the center offers facilities to showcase who you are.
His last album spotlighted some of Zimbabwe's current political and social problems. He was also a businessman, philanthropist, and UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador for Southern Africa. Mtukudzi had been battling ill health for quite some time and had to cancel a number of musical bookings around the world as a result. Many will remember Oliver Mtukudzi as a Zimbabwean music maestro who belonged to an African music royalty of the likes of his friends Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, Yusundu, and Angelique Kidjo. He may be gone, but his music legacy lives on.
Remembering Oliver Mtukudzi there. Well, let's get reaction to the story. We're going to, well, we've had lots of reaction from Harare. This is what some people have been telling us.
We have lost a great musician, African musician, who used to sing our freedom songs in African language. And he used to partner with one of our own in Kenya here called Eric Wainaina. And we have lost a great musician. I think he had creative minds in music. And I think it will be very difficult to replace him.
I remember Oliver Mtukudzi. When I was very young, my father used to play a lot of his music at home, and we felt very happy. We used to have a big radio where we surrounded and listened to the music. It was very nice.
When he came to Kenya, I was the sound engineer and interacted with him very well, together with the team that he was with. He was a cool guy.
There's reaction from Kenya. You know, his fan base spread around the world, as we've been hearing. So let's talk now to Zivane Masango, a Zimbabwean musician based in Denver, Colorado. So fantastic that you could speak to us. Your reaction, though, to his death?
It's just devastating. I couldn't believe it. I mean, rumors have broken before about his death, and he would always laugh it off. And whenever I would talk to him on the phone after that, he would say, "When I die, I'm going to call you and let you know."
How is it that you two... Sorry, how is it that you two came to work together?
I've been playing on the professional musicianship scene in Zimbabwean music for a long time. And when a tour was coming up to the US, his manager then called me and asked me if I could be part of the tour and play lead guitar for him. And I jumped on it because it had always been my dream to be to play with him.
We're hearing a lot about his support of upcoming musicians. I mean, what was he like to have him? What was it like to have him as a mentor?
He was just the most down-to-earth person and so generous with his time and generous with knowledge, and he was just always ready to listen, and it was almost like you didn't feel like you were around an icon. You felt like you were around a friend always when you were around him, and I'm gonna miss that a lot.
You know, we're hearing that his and many musicians of his generation, these descriptions that his was the soundtrack to an entire generation. He has a place in the musical history of Africa. Why did Tuku matter?
Because for me, he was the soul of Zimbabwe. He had just the right words to say in his songs. He had just the right rhythm to go along with those words to speak to any situation that was part of our lives as Zimbabweans.
Okay. Zivanai Masango, thank you so much for remembering with us the Zimbabwean legend icon, the musical icon, Tuku, who has passed away at the age of 66. Thank you. You're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Lucressa Burak. Do stay with us. There's plenty more still to come. Mimi has got the sport. And apparently it's been a good night for African starts in the NBA. Toronto Raptors have defeated the Sacramento Kings. Mimi's up next. Welcome back. I'm Lucressa Burak. A reminder of our top stories this hour. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is in Davos, reassuring international investors over his land reform plans. And Zimbabwean music legend Tuku Oliver Mtukudzi has died in hospital in Harare at the age of 66. Now, a year ago this week, the iconic international footballer George Weah officially took over the presidency of Liberia. It had been a long road to get to that point, not only for Mr. Weah himself, who grew up in the slums of the capital, Monrovia, but also for a country that was emerging from an Ebola pandemic, and before that, a brutal civil war. Well, Mike Thompson has caught up with him, whilst, as you can imagine, he was indulging in his first love.
He may be into his 50s and a little less lean than before, but George Weah still knows a thing or two about kicking a football. The number 14 captains the blue-topped team, who, I'm told, have never lost a match. Well, not since he became president, anyway. Behind me, President George Weah is up to his old tricks. A shimmy there, a dummy here, and the odd tackle or two. But what about the country's deep-seated problems? 1 year on, how's he tackling those? Is there anything from the tactics on the football pitch here that you can apply to running a country?
What is seminar here is the seriousness, to be serious, to be committed, and put in your all. I want to be a winner, I want to perform. So I bring that energy to politics. What I want to do is to work for the people, and then to develop their minds and build human capital and develop the country. That's my goal.
Humble roots hardly do justice to the Monrovian slum George Weah grew up in.
This is where he was reared and grew up by his grandmother. And as you can see, this is a slum community, but he has transformed this house to a better house now.
This freshly tarmacked road through the slums, built by Weah's fledgling government, was, until recently, a narrow, pothole dirt track. And they even found time to erect a memorial, in case anyone forgot who to thank for it all. Not that this local man, who admires what he sees as the president's extraordinary drive, seems likely to do that.
That kind of courage, that determination, you can see in George Weah. And since he became president, we can see the anxiety, the courage in our president to make Liberia a better place.
But there are few happy faces at this busy food market near the centre of town. Soaring inflation has pushed the price of staples like rice beyond the reach of many. Even some doctors in this post-Ebola country haven't been paid in months. Some blame George Weah for making promises that so far he's been unable to keep.
I do not believe what he's saying because he's a populist. He and his cheering squad will only say what the people want to hear. But the people of the country do not eat popularity. They eat solid food. If that is not provided, the popularity will decline.
Yet those I talked to at this church, funded by the Weah family, were singing the president's praises. Reports that more than $100 million worth of government money have inexplicably gone missing hadn't changed that. 1 year on, George Weah is still a hero to many. But unless he finds answers soon to Liberia's deep-rooted problems, his honeymoon is unlikely to last. Mike Thompson, BBC News, Liberia.
OK, time to catch up with the sport here on BBC Focus on Africa. Hey, Memes.
Hi, Lucressa. Good to see you as always. Now, it's just over 5 months left to the end of the Africa Cup of Nations kicks off, and the Egyptian FA has confirmed that they aren't planning on using the Borg Al Arab Stadium, which is near Alexandria, during the tournament. That's despite it being the largest stadium in the country with a capacity of 86,000. A spokesman for the Football Association said that it would be hard to fill the venue if the hosts were not playing. The venue will be on standby to hold any matches involving Egypt that are due to be played outside Cairo. Now, it's been a good week for Kenyan club Gor Mahia. They're through to the group phase of this year's African Confederation Cup and will be hoping for a place in the knockout phase. The club has enjoyed some other high-profile moments in recent weeks, not least their friendly against English Premier League side Everton. And despite losing 4-0, the experience has given their Uganda international defender Shafiq Batambuse a taste for European football. He's been speaking to BBC Sports Africa's Peter Musembi.
I'm from Uganda. I was born in Jinja, the source of the River Nile. My parents are still there. They have always wanted me to play football here in Europe. They have always believed in my abilities on the pitch. My dream has always been to play here. There are teams that I have followed, supported and loved since childhood, such as Tottenham Hotspurs and Liverpool. Even Everton is a great club with a great history. It is a club I think about. If I woke up one day and found myself here, I would play my heart out, because it has always been my dream to play in the English Premier League.
Shafiq, hebu tafakari kujikuta tena katika uwanja kama huu. Safari hii sio kuja kutembea mamechi ya kirafiki. Unacheza hapa.
I can feel so good. Naweza sikia vizuri sana.
I would feel so good if I found myself playing here, because it is my dream to play on a pitch such as this. In Africa, the pitches are not so good as these ones in Europe. So if I got a chance to come and live and play here, I'm sure I would play great football. Everyone in the world would definitely recognize me. This pitch would be such a great platform to showcase my skills. I'd be thrilled to find myself playing here for any club in the English Premier League. It is my dream.
Naweza furahia niwe tunaishi hapa. Ndio ndoto yangu ya maisha. Naweza sikia poa sana.
And in cricket, Pakistan's captain Sarfraz Ahmed could face disciplinary action for allegedly racist comments he made in Urdu to South African all-rounder Andile Fe Lukwayo during the second one-day international in Durban on Tuesday. The match referee has started an investigation, having been made aware of the incident. And finally, in basketball, a good performance for African stars in the NBA. Cameroon's Pascal Siakam had 18 points for the Toronto Raptors as they beat the Sacramento Kings 120-105. Congo-born Serge Ibaka, who plays for the Spanish national team, had 15 points and 10 rebounds as they extended their home winning streak to 10 games. And that's all the sport. Back to you, Lucressa.
Beams, thank you very much. Now, we're going to close our programme today honouring the Zimbabwean musician Oliver Mtukudzi, or Tuku.
Usaore moyo ganeria Mariane we Usaore moyo ganeria Mariane we